How many people watch that show at all? At some point? One of the most longest running popular TV shows in TV history. And for me, when I think about Cheers, there's the song. And then there is one thing that happens in every episode. Norm! And this was the thing that made the show what it was the sense of family. And it would be a place, hey Dan, if you can stand up, where it'd be like, you actually missed each other. Hey, it's good to see you, woo, yes. And that feel was something, thank you Dan, that feel was something that we all want. We are created for community. And, in that show, it did something. It was interesting. On May 20th, 1993, a moment happened in America, and there would be few moments like it again. Some 84 million Americans, at that point, almost a third, over a fourth of America gathered together in homes, in bars, restaurants, airports, and they watched the final episode of Cheers. There's a little bit of irony, of course. All these people gathered around televisions to watch a show about a place where a little community was formed, a little family, where everybody knows your name. This in an increasingly isolating age. Some 18 years ago, Robert Putnam wrote a book where he talked about the reality that our society is becoming more isolated and fragmented, losing our social cohesion. And a symptom of it is that more and more people, the name of the book is called Bowling Alone. Bowling used to be one of these things that you would do to gather in community, and more people now just bowl alone. The irony of 84 million people gathering around television sets is they were gathering around the very device that has done more in the 20th century to break down that sense of social cohesion, of that we're part of a larger community, because we all, instead of getting out into community, sit in front of our TV sets and isolate ourselves. But watching this show about a place where a family was formed, because, well, we all want that, because we were made for it. Now, with the advent of cable television, and then internet, and smartphones, and tablets, it has only gotten worse. It is unlikely that there will ever be a moment like that again in American history where over a fourth, nearly a third of the population tunes in just to watch the final episode of any television show. Got too many options today. You got the main channels, but nobody even watches those pretty much anymore, because you've got Amazon and you've got Netflix and you've got Apple TV and Hulu, and then you have YouTube, and everything is fracturing into smaller and smaller groupings of people. The only thing that's a little bit like it, but it's not a TV show, but it's something that we all do and we gather around the television set, is the Super Bowl. Of course, even that is getting ruined because it's being politicized, and we're seeing this breakdown of the social cohesion of our society. But before there was Cheers, there was the church. This is central to Jesus' call for us. His purpose is that we are saved into a new family. We are given companions. The world is broken, it is hard, and we were never intended to try to get through this world all by ourselves. We need help along the way, and so God provides a family for us. This is to be a community marked by grace over judgment, love over hate, service over selfishness, joy over despair, and care over callousness. That's our call. Now, we haven't arrived. There is no perfect church. There will be times where we fall short of this. There will be the need for us to not only practice grace, but forgiveness. But that's where we're headed. Now, we're in this series, and it's called Fractals, Faith, and Our Future. And what we're talking about is we're keying in on a problem that we as the church community have before us. It's a challenge. We are beginning to lose a generation as part of our church. Between ages of 18 and 35, people are beginning to experience that church isn't a place for them, that their representation in our midst is becoming less and less. And so we're talking about this challenge because we don't want to be a church that loses a generation. We don't want to be a church that ultimately dies. And this has been inspired by a study that's called Growing Young. Kara Powell, Jake Mulder, and Brad Griffin are the authors of this book. And they are part of the Fuller Youth Institute, and they've been looking at the issues of what is happening in the church today, especially among youth ministry, and then the end result of what happens to youth after they graduate. Now, sometimes in series, we will have people and encourage all the life groups to read a book and along with the sermon series. And we didn't ask everybody to read this book. It tends to be a little bit, about church leadership and these things, but it's at the same time it's very interesting, and we wanted to make it available. I am so excited because we have already either sold or given out 50 copies of this book to people in the church. And what we're asking is for you to take this series, seriously, because it is about our future. As we look at the challenge that we're losing a generation, we're saying we're going to have to make some changes. We're going to have to be willing to get uncomfortable. But not all change is bad. There's good change. And growth sometimes feels a little uncomfortable, but it's good. And just so you know, anybody who wants to read this book, wonderful. There's a suggested donation, but if you don't have it, just take it. There's 20 more copies available. I got 20 the first week, and those were all gone in just a couple minutes. Got 30 more last week. Those are all gone. Brought 20 more in. Now, part of it, what it represents and what we're asking is that even if you're not here, we'd like you to watch the sermons online and engage with the material. Because we want to have conversations about this, about where are we, but where do we need to go, and to understand that as we talk about pivoting and making some changes from what we've done in the past, that we will understand that it is this goal to try to grow up where we live into the vision of being a church where all generations and all sorts of people, all kinds of people in our community find a place here and they have a place to belong. Now, one of the things, and there's good news with this, there's the challenge, but there are congregations that are bucking the trend. They are finding a path. They are living into and being represented. We are a generational church. We have all generations represented here. But we don't want to be a church that loses a generation. And we would love to see more people who are in their 20s and 30s feel like they can join with us, just as we are excited about the idea of anybody in any generation joining with us. But one of the things that they're keying in on, and that's our focus for today, and it's why we started with Cheers, is that one of the things that people are looking for, especially people 18 to 35, but anybody on the outside, is they are looking for a place where it feels more like a family. And the language that they use in the book is a place that's marked not just like any family, but warm relationships. But I want to begin by giving you a picture of how coming into the church can feel, especially for people between the ages of 18 and 35, but probably for anybody coming in on the outside. And not everybody can see this, but there's a pumpkin. It says, "Give thanks." Here is a picture of a Thanksgiving dinner table. And for all the major holidays when I was a kid, we gathered with our extended family. Most typically the Kinnickers, but sometimes my mom's side as well. And especially with the Kinnicker side, there would be this dining room table, and it would be all done up with the tablecloths and the place settings and the crystal and it looked beautiful. And our Kinnicker gathering, we had about 35 people, 40 people there, and we'd all gather in the kitchen, and Grandpa would say a prayer, and then there would be a lineup for food. And all the adults would go into the dining room, and it looked something like this. And then this is what it looked like for us. We didn't get the fine china. We got the paper plates. And most often it was down in the basement. And there'd be some folding chairs. You know what this is called, right? The kids' table. And there wouldn't be enough folding chairs. So you'd get the piano bench. I have to sit in the middle. I'm not supposed to sit on the side, but I'd have to sit on the side because you would share the piano bench. And this is where we would be. Now, anybody experience the kids' table? And some of the kids' table, there was no tablecloth, but there'd be mats under the table so that you wouldn't spill on the carpet. Now, I remember being 23 years old and still sitting at the kids' table. and it was, and your knees would be hitting. And now, here is an unintended consequence of this. There came a place where we didn't really want to be with them because they seemed all stuffy and boring. And so we came down and we had a good time. Now, there is a place in the church where we need to gather together, and when you're in different generations, you need to gather with your peer group. We're in a stage of life, we're going through something, and we have unique challenges. And one of the challenges of experiencing family and being the church is having enough time. And it takes time for this. And so one of the things that we have done is that we've given space for peer groups to meet. And with those challenges, what we've ended up doing is that on Sunday mornings, middle school and high school students, they're literally down in the basement. And we've cleaned it up a little bit. The middle school space is being revamped, so it's not quite like sitting at, the cardboard table and the card table, the folding table. But one of the unintended consequences of this is that you graduate, and now what? And there's been no connection. And what the word is that what we really experience, there was a time when I really wanted to sit over here because it was all fancy and beautiful and cool. But the word is exclusion. And so it's not just something with the high schoolers, but it's something for people who have graduated all the way up into their 30s, and they can come into a place like this, and they're married, and they even have kids, and it's like, I don't even get a place there. And we feel excluded. This is also true for anybody who's coming into the church, and this is different, and there can be that place. Now, I will tell you that this is something where Westside, we're on the grow in this. When I first came here, and here's some of the tension with it. When I first came here, there were some people who was experiencing Sunday morning just as a visitor, not as a kid, but anybody. We have a lot of people here who've been a part of Westside for a number of years, and your relationships get filled up, and you have these friends, and you want to talk, and people actually experience Westside as being somewhat unfriendly. More often than not, people are beginning to experience Westside as being a friendly place. They're warmly welcome. There's greeters, and people are, but there are still people, and there is this challenge as far as, especially in this stage of life between 18 and 35 of what's my place and am I going to be accepted, and is there a place for me to be with the other adults, because they don't treat me like I'm an adult. They still treat me as if I belong at the kids' table. And the reality is what people feel is exclusion. And that is not what we're called to be. We are called to follow Jesus. And so what I want us to look at today is a passage of Scripture where we see Jesus dealing with the issue of exclusion. It's from Luke chapter 15. And I'm going to begin by giving you the background of the picture, of the story that he tells. And I'll just read these verses for you. It comes from Luke 15, verses 1 through 3. Now the tax collectors and sinners were all gathered around to hear Jesus. But the Pharisees, who were the religious leaders, and the teachers of the law muttered, "This man welcomes sinners, and he eats with them." And then Jesus told them this parable. And so what I want you to understand is that here's a situation where literally the people were upset with who Jesus was sharing the table with. And what he was saying is those people don't belong here. They should be excluded. And what Jesus ends up doing is he doesn't just tell one parable, but he tells three parables. And in telling these three parables, what he is trying to do is paint a picture for us of the way of God the Father and the love that God has for all of us. And if we know the gospel, we know this story. For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son. And Jesus came to this broken world and became a human being and identified with us in every way, to embrace us, to deal with our sin problem, to even die in our place, so that by his death, he could lift up all of us out of our brokenness and give us a place at this great big celebration table of his, where everybody's welcome, everybody's known, everybody has a name, where we will live with God forever and ever. What we find is that the heart of God is not a God who wants to exclude anybody, but a God who looks to embrace us all. Now, the picture that Jesus was painting of this God who loves us and wants to embrace us climaxes in the third story. It's a story of a father with two sons. It is one of the most beloved and well-known of all of Jesus' teachings. It comes to us with the most common title being the parable of the prodigal son. And there's a little bit of a sadness about the title because it kind of misdirects as far as what the main point of this story is. A lot of people will assume that this is primarily a story about a father who forgives a wayward son. And it has that truth in it, but that is not the point of the story. The point of the story is the older brother who wants to exclude the younger brother from the table because of the way that he's lived his life. Remember the religious leaders, the Pharisees, the teachers of the law, they didn't want the sinners, the tax collectors, welcome at the table. Jesus is painting this picture and saying, you're missing the heart of the Father. You don't understand. This is not about excluding, but this is about embracing. Now, for our purposes, what I want to do is I want to focus on just one little picture from this story. It's the picture of the way that the Father welcomes the Son home. The son who was the wayward son who squandered all of his wealth. I'm going to read from Luke 15 verses 20 through 24. If you're not familiar with, if you don't remember, let me just paint a little bit of the backdrop of this. The story opens up, and the younger son basically says, "Dad, I wish you were dead so that I could have what's coming to me, my inheritance, and I wouldn't have to be here anymore." And the father says, "Okay." And he sells a third of all that he has, and he gives him the money from that, and the son leaves. And the son goes off and he forsakes everything, leaves his entire culture, community, leaves it all behind, goes off to a far country, squanders it all in wild living, and he finds himself in a place where he's almost a slave. He's an indentured servant. Life is really hard, and he realizes, it would be better to be back home as a servant in my father's house than in my present condition. And so he devises a plan of how he can return home and at least become a servant. And then this is where the scene picks up. Verse 20. So he, the younger brother, got up and went to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. The son said to him, "Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son." But the father said to his servants, "Quick! Bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found." And so they began to celebrate. And here's what we see. The heart of the Father is painting a picture of the very heart of God. And what we see is compassionate embrace. Compassion. To care so much that you actually suffer because the other is suffering. Not exclusion, but embrace. An embrace because you want to be part of this person's life and you want to help them stop feeling the pain. Ken Bailey is somebody who's helped us read this parable well, because there's about 2,000 years between Jesus' day and our day, and there's cultural gaps. And there's stuff here that we miss without understanding the culture. And now, one of the things, and this is just more of an observation, is just to realize, while he was still a long way off, the father was looking for this son. The father always loved this son. The father missed this son. Even though the son had rejected him, even though the son had said, "I wished you were basically dead," the father wanted the son back. And while he was still a long way off, the father was looking out in the distance, looking for his son to return, and he sees his son. Now, the father knows that this son is going to suffer because of the community. Because everybody in the community would be upset. They would want to exclude. They would want to reject. You did this to your father. You shamed him. You shamed us. You rejected us. There's a possibility that they would turn on the son immediately and cast stones and just get him out of town. The father doesn't want the son to suffer. The father feels the pain of the son. And so, while he's still a long way off, he runs. Now, the insight is realize that if you're an older father in Middle Eastern times and you were wearing robes, you didn't run. That would be shaming. That would be beneath you. You're supposed to conduct yourself in a certain way. But to run, you've got to pick up your robes. Now, the father knows that when the son comes, the community is going to reject. And he doesn't want the son to suffer anymore. And so he decides that he'll bring the focus of the community on him. What is he doing? What's going on? Why is he shaming himself? Why is he acting in such an undignified way? And so he runs and he draws the attention of the community upon himself, and then he comes and he communicates to everybody, to his son and to the whole community. And he comes back and he just throws his arms around his son and he kisses him. This is my son. He belongs to me. The son had a rehearsed speech. He had this idea, this plan. Here's what I'll do, and then I'll become a servant. The father doesn't even allow him to finish the speech. Quick, go bring the robe. Get the sandals on his feet. Put a ring on his finger. He is a son in my house. He is given a place of honor. He isn't going to be shamed. He isn't going to be excluded. We are going to celebrate because this son of mine was dead and he is alive again. If we have people who are feeling excluded in our community, we should be hurting. And we should be ready to wrap our arms around them. We are called to give people compassionate embrace. And here's one of the exciting things for me in the study of Growing Young and what they're looking at is that one of the things that people are looking for outside the church, especially people 18 to 35, is they're actually looking for a place where its focus is on authentic, warm relationships. It's not so much about a program. It's not so much about a show. What they want to know, and what excites me about this is that this is the core of what it means to be the church. What they want to know is this is a place that's going to be accepting and authentic and real, hospitable, welcoming. The study calls this the warmth clusters, that in these churches where this is the experience that you have, that it's warm, caring, authentic, real, that these are the places that people want to come and be part of. Like I said, I think there's a lot of things that we are doing well at Westside where we are creating warm community. But there's still the reality that there's going to be some people who are feeling excluded. And we want to be a place where everybody knows your name. And everybody's name is known. And you're missed. But it goes a little bit deeper because what they mean by warm community is they're valuing authenticity over being polished and fake. And it means being real, not putting on a show. It means a place where the messiness of life can be shared. Because life is hard. And nobody has all the answers. And we're all struggling. And there's challenges that we're facing. And if we project a place where you got to get all cleaned up before you can come, it won't be warm, but it'll be exclusive. Now, there's this though. A place where we feel truly accepted, but will also challenge me to grow. I haven't yet arrived. None of us have yet arrived. The world is hard, but there's skills to learn. And we have a hope, a desire that we can help make this world a better place. What's drawing people to the church is a place where it's not so much about a show or a program, but way deep down at the very core of what this community is warm relationships that share life together. So, compassionate embrace, but compassionate embrace also means costly embrace. The Father, he was willing to pay the price. He was willing, not only did he feel sorry for his son, empathy, but he suffered with, to the point where he was like, I'd rather have more suffering come on me than on my son. So I'll shame myself. I'll run through the community. I'll draw all the attention and the scorn onto myself. And this father, because of love, was willing to pay a lot. He sold a third of all he had for his son. He was willing to forgive his son, even though his son said, I wish you were dead. And he was willing to embrace his son and restore him back into the family. No matter what, this had to be celebrated. This son of mine was dead and is alive again. We need to choose costly embrace. When we realize that people are being excluded, we've got to see the cost. And part of the cost of being a warm community, being authentic community, is that it means we're going to have to be willing to get a little uncomfortable. We want to make sure that there's room at the table, and so it means we're going to need to squeeze in. We're going to make sure that people feel like they have a place. It means stepping aside and having somebody else, and we're going to talk about this in a couple of weeks about keychain leadership, and intentionally making sure that people who are younger know that they have an opportunity to affect real change in our community, but also on our mission together. It means we're going to have to get outside of our comfort zones to become a little uncomfortable. One of the ancient callings of the church is hospitality. And it's the willingness to make room for a stranger no matter what the price of that discomfort or cost is. One of the things they note in the book, Growing Young, is the reality that there are people outside the church who, when they come in, they feel like they're strangers. Or you've been sitting down in the basement and you're 23 years old and you come up here and nobody knows you and you feel like a stranger. That's not the way it's supposed to be. Thinking about the call of being a place that pays the price and is truly hospitable, Christine Pohl writes, she says, "In hospitality, Christian hospitality, the stranger is welcomed into a safe, personal, and comfortable place. A place of respect and acceptance and friendship. Even if only briefly, the stranger is included in a life-giving and life-sustaining network of relations. Such welcome involves attentive listening and mutual sharing of lives and life stories. It requires an openness of heart, a willingness to make one's life visible to others, and the generosity of time and resources." Now, we need to see the cost. It's going to cost us something. It'll take time. It'll take money. It'll take discomfort. It will take a level of sharing that maybe some of us aren't used to doing. It'll be some changes that are going to occur on the way that we approach Sunday morning. But I want to give us a picture of seeing the cost of not being willing to embrace somebody. So, when I was 12 years old at a Thanksgiving dinner with my extended family at the Kinnickers, I was at my pudgiest phase. And I won't throw the person under the bus, but somebody lifted up my shirt and squeezed my fat, and they mocked me in front of my entire family. And that's something that ended up shaping my whole self-image. It's a wound that's still there. Look at the little fat kid. We live in a broken world. And lots of things will happen to us where we get beaten up in the world, and even in some of our own families, we will end up making to be felt like we are worthless and we are excluded. It's not going to be that way in the church. We're called to something better. And we're going to pay the price to get uncomfortable so that nobody feels excluded. And there's people out there who have a lot worse wounds and things that have happened to them. And they need to know that there is a place where they will be embraced. And they won't be excluded. So what I'm saying is, let's pay the price. Let's get a little bit uncomfortable. Let's be willing to open up. And I have an exercise for us. And Wayne, if you can come up here, and I'm going to invite everybody to stand. This might push you out of your comfort zone just a little bit. Stand up. Okay, now turn so that where you're forming a line, and there's going to be one person who doesn't have anybody to put their hands on, but get close and get into a place where you can have somebody. You're going to give somebody a back rub. Okay, now we're going to do this appropriately. So, you're going to do shoulders. Keep your hands, and we don't want to make people feel too uncomfortable. Does that feel good? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, I don't see everybody doing it. I'm getting. Okay, I see two guys, too much, and they're father and son. I'm like, oh my goodness. Now, turn around. Okay, doesn't that feel good? Okay. Here's an image. We're going to be a church that has each other's backs, okay? There we go. Thank you. It used to be There's this thing where when you're a pastor, you have to pay attention to these things, where you trace out the history of preaching. And back in the 50s and 60s, what you could expect from a sermon is that you'd have a text, and you'd have 3 points of application, but they would be fairly non-personal points of application. And then you'd have some sort of a poem or something at the end, and that would be kind of the way that you'd approach putting a sermon together. And over time, it began to shift where in the 80s, you started to get people who wanted to get a little bit more. They wanted to know what was going on. But today, it's shifted even a little more where you don't really just do personal illustrations. But what people are looking for is they're looking for real authenticity, where you don't just share success, but you share failure. And you share the messiness of life, and you get real about the challenges that you're facing, and because people want to know what do we do with it, and how do we get through it, and not just that everything works and what's going on. And those are things where it's not just from up here, but it's down here, where we've got to be willing to step out into our comfort zone a little bit. We've got to be willing to share life together. So what if, living into this reality, we start redefining some things? What if we redefine success? And success is not merely the fact that more people join with us, but success only happens when there is a deep sense that people who are part of and joining with us have deep community, where they're known by name, where there's a sense that we share life together. In the book, they'll talk about this as far as with younger people, 5-to-1 ratio. Used to be in youth ministry that you'd want one adult leader for every 5 students. Chap Clark with Fuller Youth Institute said, you know what? What we're finding is that you have to inverse it. You need 5 adults for every 1 student. Not that they're all just a leader, but that there's 5 relationships formed. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago. We want to be an intergenerational church. We want to form relationships across the generations. We need one another. Younger people need older people in your wisdom. Older people need younger people because there's vitality, there's energy, there's idealism. There is still the belief that we can change this world because we can, not in our own strength, but through the power of the Holy Spirit. What if we are a place that is marked by the warmth and by this acceptance, and that people who are broken and coming out of a world where there is isolation, they finally feel like here is a family that I can belong with? That's the vision for us. That's what we want to live into. Every generation, everybody included. Will you pray with me? Dear Lord, we give thanks for the call that you have for us to be your people. Lord, bless us. And we pray that we will be willing to pay the price to make sure that people don't feel excluded, but in fact are taken right into the table, warmly embraced, costly embraced. In Jesus' name, amen.